So I have a couple really tiny projects I figured we could work through together. The first one is just a little short warm-up. And then I'll be talking about integrating js-beautify, which is a code pretty printer. So one of the things I enjoy doing when I'm procrastinating in Vim is thinking about refining built-in features such that they're maybe a little more useful. I'm going to be talking about marks, first of all. Hopefully you're familiar with marks already. Essentially, you can bookmark locations in your buffers. And the way you do that is M followed by your mark name, which is an alphabetical key. So if I'm on line 2 here, I can MA to set a mark there. I'm going to move down here, MB, and now I can jump between marks with backtick followed by the mark name. So backtick A will jump me back to where I was. Backtick B will jump me back down my B mark. You can view all the marks that are currently set with the marks command in command line mode here. I'm going to hit enter there. And that just gives you a nice summary of mark locations. This is the mark name here. They give you line column number. This isn't just lines, by the way. You can jump to a particular column in the line you bookmarked. And then it gives you the text of that line. So what we're going to do here is we're going to make an enhanced marks command that's more useful than the built-in one, at least in my opinion. One shortcoming this has is if I'm looking at the list of marks, I probably want to jump to one. That's why I'm here. However, as soon as I hit backtick to jump to one, the thing disappears. Hit A, I go there. Okay, so that's a little too many steps. If I have the marks command open, let's say I want to be prompted for a mark right there, and all I want to do is just hit the letter and I jump to where I'm going. So let's try that out. We're going to just create a marks.vim file. Arbitrary name. We don't need this. Let's see. Enhanced marks command. All right, so defining a command. So we're on the same page here. We use the command to define a command. There you go. That's followed by the command name. Vim enforces a rule that all user-defined commands have to start with a capital letter, presumably so they don't conflict with built-ins, and so you cannot override built-in commands. So the convention I'm going to follow here is just naming my enhanced marks command after the marks command, but with a capital M. And then that's followed by the command we want to execute when we invoke our custom command. And for this exercise, I'm going to call a function I'm going to define here. So I'm going to call, let's call it marks. Okay. We're going to write the file here. Now, if we want to actually execute the script we just wrote, you can use the source command followed by the %, which represents the path of the current buffer's file. I'm going to get an error if I do this because I actually already have a marks command defined, which leads me to my next point, which is generally when we define a command, we want to use the bang variant of the command. because that'll override any existing command we have that's called marks. And since we're going to be sourcing this file over and over again as we fill out the functionality and all that, we're going to want to overwrite our previous definition. And I'm not going to bother sourcing the file manually every time I have a shortcut that I'm going to be using. All right. So now this should work. We should have a marks command, and it will give me an error because we have not defined our marks function. Okay. Everybody following so far? Okay. Please.
What does S stand for? S column? I forgot.
Yeah. So this is the scope of the function.
First I saved it.
Yeah.
This is one of the possible scopes. This is a script local function, as opposed to a global function, which is available in any context. The rule of thumb I follow is always use script local functions and variables unless you have a reason not to, right? Okay, so let's define our function. We're going to call it marks. It's going to take no parameters, and in the body, let's just call the marks command as just a smoke test. Okay, and then we can issue this, and it calls marks as we'd expect. Great. Okay, I think the first improvement I want to make is actually restrict the marks it shows us to ones I've set manually. A lot of these marks are set by Vim automatically and can be useful. Like in particular, the dot mark I find pretty useful. It's automatically set by Vim, and it's set in the location of your last edit. So if you need to jump back to where you just made an edit, which is probably a fairly common need, that can be useful. But so I'm just going to restrict this list to the lowercase alphabetic marks and the dot mark. And the marks command takes a single argument, which is a list of the marks you want to show if they exist. So I'm just going to do the alphabetical ones and the dot. And so now when we issue marks, we should get only those. Okay. And if I had set C or D or whatever, those would show up as well. Okay, but as I said, I want a prompt for a mark to jump to. So let's do that. The appropriate function for the strategy I want to take here is to show the marks menu and then prompt for the mark name, right? And that's always going to be a single character. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to populate a variable here with a single character that we ask for. So this getChar function, it'll stop the execution of our script and wait for a single character from us. Once we type that character, it will return and execution will resume. There's a catch though, that in that getChar returns the numerical ASCII value for the character. So we actually, need to wrap this in another function called number2char. And that'll actually get us the literal character and fill marks with it. I have not, this marks variable, I could also write it like this. Either way, it's local to the function. So this is another example of specifying the scope. As opposed to script local, this is function local. And if you don't specify a scope for a variable, if it's in a function, the default scope is local to the function. If it's not in a function, it's global. But confusingly, these are both local but different variables. So keep that in mind. Yeah, so I have another rule of thumb, and that is every global variable I write, I always prefix with G colon. Every local variable I write, I leave off the prefix because it's convenient. And that way there's no confusion. Okay, so we have the character we want in this marks variable, and then we can issue, okay, so we have the mark name, we just need to jump to the mark now. The normal way to do that is backtick mark name, right? So, and that's a normal mode command. So we can simulate that in a script with the normal command, right? We want the normal bang variant because, well, it's just for safety in this case. But with the bang, the following normal mode commands will always be executed as if there are no mappings present, right? So if we had remapped backtick, for example, in our configuration somewhere for some reason, that mapping is ignored and the built-in functions used instead. So we want to do normal backtick followed by the variable name. Normal doesn't take a VimScript expression, though. We can't simply stick a variable in here and expect it to do the right thing. It's followed by literal normal mode commands. So what we have to do is wrap this in an execute. This becomes a string, and then we can concatenate that with our marks variable. So everybody following that? So what we're doing here is we're building a string that's normal, execute the following normal mode commands, backtick the character that represents our mark name, that gets concatenated into a string and then evaluated as VimScript. So I'm going to source this and let's try it out. Marks. Okay. So presumably it's waiting for a character now. I'm going to hit A. Good. We don't have an A mark set in this file. So let's do that. Let's marks. Okay, this is our A mark. Hit A. Okay, now we have a problem here. Press enter or type command to continue. This is part of the listing that Vim gives you when you issue the marks command. So we can get around that with a redraw. This is a handy command, not only when your terminal gets screwed up and you need to redraw the screen, but to get around this prompt to hit enter, which unfortunately comes up a lot. I'm also going to add a nice jump, some prompt text. Jump to mark. Let's see how that works. Okay, so now we have a prompt down here. I'm going to hit A to jump to the A mark. Let's see if that works. Yep. Okay. Let me jump down here.
It's so weird. I would have expected that you would like execute normal enter or something like that instead of redraw. It's surprising to me that redraw kind of hits enter in this scenario.
Right. I believe that doing it that way would fail because when Vim prompts you to press any key to continue, it's not waiting for any normal commands. It's in a different mode. So that, the enter key wouldn't be processed until you had dismissed the prompt some other way. So that's why we have to use redraw.
Okay.
Yeah. All right, so that was just a little warm up for get us used to defining commands and functions. Okay. What I really want to talk about, one of the great things about Vim is its easy integration with other command line tools. I'm going to be talking about js-beautify, which is a command line pretty printer for it's this project. It formats JavaScript, HTML, CSS, JSON. I think that's it.
I actually have a question for you.
Yeah.
So you know when you want to execute a shell command, you can do like bang ls or something?
Yep.
And after it executes, it asks you to hint enter. You can script that out with a redraw, right?
Yeah, but you would wind up dismissing the output from your command. So,
Let's say I wanted to like make a dir or something.
oh, right. You could use the more natural way to do that would just be prefix the silent command, so there's no output. So if I want to get like a directory listing but not see it for some reason, we can do silent ls.
Cool.
But we couldn't use that with the marks command because we actually want to see the marks, right? All right, anything else? Yeah, so speaking of the bang operator, that's naturally how we would integrate with js-beautify. I'm just going to give you an example. This is some HTML I pulled from the meetup page on meetup.com. So if I wanted to format this with js-beautify, just to give you an example, we could first of all specify a range representing the entire buffer, because I want to reformat the entire buffer, followed by the bang, because we want to execute a command line or a shell command, followed by the executable name. Okay. js-beautify takes a bunch of arguments that are required. We have to tell it that this is HTML. We can do that with the type argument, type HTML. We have to specify where to read a file in. It doesn't read from standard in unless you tell it to specifically, unfortunately. That's a file dash. And that should do it for us. There we go. Excuse the messed up highlighting. So essentially it's indented our HTML for us.
Is it modifying the buffer in place, like changing the file?
Yeah. So the range bang filters the range of lines through the utility, and yeah, so we're filtering the entire contents of the buffer through it.
And why didn't you have to hit enter after that ran?
After the what?
It didn't ask you to push enter?
No, I don't think it did. That may be because I'm in GUI Vim.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I believe that's the reason.
Cool.
Okay. All right. So that obviously works, but we can make this a little cleaner. Having to specify a range every time may be unnecessary because generally I want to act on the whole buffer using this tool. Specifying the file type is unnecessary because Vim already knows what type of file we have. So I don't really want to include that on the command line either. Also, I don't want to have to tell it to read from standard in. So let's make a wrapper command to wrap up this utility. It's a little easier to use. So I'm going to create a new js-beautify.vim. Okay. So we're gonna go about this the same way. Command bang. because we want to redefine it if it already exists. There are some flags that the command takes that I didn't mention before. One of which is useful is what was I going to say? The bar flag you usually want. What this means, you can chain commands down here with the bar character. So for example, if I want to, what's a good example? I have no idea. Write the buffer and then say hello. We can delimit these with the bar character. This is actually not going to work for write, but if you're creating custom commands and you want to allow it to be composed with other commands with a bar delimiter on the command line, you have to include this bar flag. So generally you should include it unless you have a reason not to. Certain commands don't have this because they consume the bar following. For example, oh man, I'm not going to be able to think of an example off the top of my head. The global command. You can if you're familiar with that, it will execute commands for each matching line in your pattern. And you can execute multiple commands with this bar delimiter. So in that case, the global command actually consumes everything, including the bar. But in our case, it doesn't matter. We can let it be. Also, there's the nargs flag, which tells Vim how many parameters our command takes. In our case, at least for right now, we want to enforce 0 arguments. Our command doesn't take any arguments. And what I mean by that is, like write takes an argument, which is a file name, right? Okay, that'll do it for now. I'm going to call this js-beautify. Okay. And we're just going to, once again, call a custom function. I'm just going to call it js-beautify. Okay. Okay. And I'm taking advantage of that insert mode completion.
The automating text insertion from previous meetup too. You're writing faster than ever.
Okay. So this is a little more complicated than our previous version because there's a lot going on. We want to pass various arguments to this utility. And those arguments are going to vary from buffer to buffer because we're going to be really fancy and have it do the right thing in different file types, among other things. So the strategy I'm going to take here is I'm going to build a list of strings and then concatenate them and execute them at the end of the function. And this will make sense in a minute. So let's create a command. So this is the syntax for a Vim list. So we're going to be executing JS. Yeah. Okay. And then at the end here, we're going to execute the list. Okay. Except that's not a string. We're going to have to join, oops. We're going to join all the list items into a string and then execute that. It's going to be easier to debug though if we just, whoops, we can just echo the result of our commands so far. I think that's usually a pretty good way to go about building up something where you want feedback as you go. So what this should do is provide a js-beautify command, and when we run it, I want to see that string here. So this is what we'll be executing when we actually are running this. So that's good. So as I said, we need to tell it to read from standard in. So I'm gonna, so this is how in VimScript you do line continuation. All right. So I'm going to add a couple more arguments here. Oh, excuse me, I'm missing a character there. So we need to pass that file flag. Okay. So we can verify that that works. Good. Okay. Now the fun part. So as I said, JS Beautify supports a few different types of files that it will format. And we pass that along with the type flag. So how do we get the current file type in Vim?
Set file type?
Sure, that'll echo it in the echo area, the command line. We can get the file type into a variable with let type, and then we can, whenever you need the value of an option in VimScript, use the ampersand followed by the option name. So that'll get us the value, the current value file type. And then we can use that in our list of arguments here. So I'm going to let our command variable, and then I'm going to call a function that just adds an item to the list. So that takes the list variable as the first argument, and then what the element we want to add is the second argument. So we're going to add type is the flag that JS Beautify takes. I'm just gonna, sorry. And then, yeah. So the dot is concatenation. I think we used that earlier, maybe not.
Yeah.
Okay.
Dash dash file, the last dash is needed. What does it do if we need to know?
Oh, yeah. So normally the utility reads a file from disk, and so this specifies the file path, but the dash means read from standard in instead.
Oh, that's weird.
Yeah.
Pull request waiting there.
Yeah, so we should be able to. All right, so we're in a Vim script, so the file type is Vim. Obviously, this is not going to work. We probably want to restrict this to the file types in which the command will actually work. So as I said, that's HTML, JSON, JavaScript, and CSS. There are a couple ways to go about this, but the way I prefer is to only define the command in buffers in which it's relevant. So we're going to actually define a buffer, a local command instead of a global command. So we're going to make this JS Beautify thing buffer local by including the buffer flag. But we don't want it defined in this buffer. We want it defined in any buffers of the file types we're interested in. So yeah, we want. So I'm just going to define auto command group here, so that we can run this in an auto command on the file type event. So there's a lot going on here. Let me auto command. Oops. Yes. File type. Okay, so actually we're gonna. Okay, so what's going on here? How many people are familiar with auto commands? So I don't waste anybody's time. Okay.
Read them.
All right. So Vim fires events when things happen. When we read a buffer in, when we write a file, when the file type is set, which is what we're interested in here. And the way we can hook into those events is through auto commands. So this auto command keyword says, okay, I want to listen to the following event, followed by the event name. This is the file type event, which gets fired every time the file type is set on a buffer. And that happens when you open a file, right? It reads the file into buffer, and it goes through file type detection to determine what file type we write in. Normally that's based on the file extension. Sometimes a little extra stuff goes on. And then it fires this event. Then we specify a pattern to further narrow down what we're interested in. In this case, for the file type event, we're interested in the file types, right? So this is going to fire whenever the file type of a new buffer or whatever happens to be HTML, CSS, JavaScript, etc. In that case, execute the following command. That's what this says. I'm just using line continuation here to, so we don't have a massive line. And then we're defining our command, but it's buffer local. So it's only defined in the buffers we're interested in now. I'm wrapping this all in an auto command group, which groups your auto commands. What's the advantage of that? Well, it lets us clear the group. This is important because every time we source the file, we're defining a new auto command. Vim doesn't have any way of knowing that, that we mean to redefine an auto command. It just registers a new one every time we source the file. Which we don't want, because then after we've been developing the script and sourced it 10 times, every time the file event is fired, Vim will try to define this buffer local command 10 times, which is wasteful and in certain cases will actually cause issues. So if we put it in a group and clear all the auto commands in the group every time we source the file, we don't get this buildup of auto commands, right? Clear the group and then redefine the one command we have in there. So that's what's going on here. So that auto command bang will just clear the current group. You can also use this outside of this group construct, followed by the group name if you need to. Hopefully that explanation was clear. If not, let me know. All right, so I'm gonna source this. I believe, so our js-beautify command's still left over defined from earlier. All right. Yeah, so we got the file type thing working. I have some, I have some messy CSS here. This is a minified CSS file. Again, I pulled it from the meetup page. This is all one line with the white space removed. So let's try our new command here. All right, it works. Cool. So one thing I'm noticing here, this obnoxious highlighting here is telling me that I have indentation set to use tabs, but we have spaces here. JS Beautify will just use spaces unless you tell it otherwise. So I think one of the final enhancements we're going to make here. Oh, by the way, oh, that's strange. Okay, so yeah, one of the final enhancements here we're going to make is telling JS Beautify how we want the indentation to work. We can actually make it match the Vim settings, which can be really handy because you might be working on a project where it's important to be consistent or whatnot. Let's see. Yes, that's what I wanted to talk about.
Are we actually executing the command?
No, we were not. That's why I hesitated earlier. That's left over from something else. So what I wanted to talk about now is the range issue. Yeah, so we weren't actually executing the command. We were executing some other version of it from previously. Apologize for that. And the reason that happened is I didn't resource or read the file in again, so our file type command or event rather didn't fire, and therefore our new command didn't actually get defined. By the way, you can manually fire one of these events with do auto command file type. That's useful to know. Yeah. Okay. Now we're executing the command. Now it's just echoing our command down here. So we can see the file types getting set correctly. Good. All right. Okay, so ranges. So you notice that we didn't actually have a range down there, which means it would only affect the line we're on currently.
Which is a whole file in the case of CSS.
Yeah, I suppose that would work. Yeah. Okay, but we probably want to specify a range in general. In particular, let's see. If we want to pass on the... Okay, so we want our custom command probably to take a range, first of all. That would be useful. So what we can do is use these special placeholders down here. These only have meaning within a command definition, and they represent the boundaries of the range we specify. Now, as I have it here, what this means is if we specify a range, call our function for each line in that range. And we don't want that. We just want to invoke JS Beautify once on the lines that we specified. So we're going to fix this by specifying the range flag, or whatever you want to call it, on our function definition here, so that these lines are the lines are passed to our function as arguments automatically. And the way we, I should mention, arguments, as long as we're talking about variable scope, arguments have their own little prefix, which is a colon, as opposed to L colon for local. first. So we can access the range with first line and last line, which is wonderfully inconsistent with line 1 and line 2, which we have to use down here. Yeah, so we're going to just concatenate this together with a comma and the rest of our stuff. So what I'm doing here, so range automatically passes in the range as arguments to our function. I'm taking those and building a new range to pass to our command with its arguments. And to demonstrate how that works, I'm gonna have to edit again. Okay, so we haven't passed a range, so it's just doing the current line, which is 1. All right, this is expected. So if I do pass a range, let's say the whole file, no range allowed. Okay, let's fix that. So our command doesn't take a range because we haven't passed the, we haven't supplied the range flag. Now this actually takes an argument, which is the default range, which is really useful because usually I want our custom command to be run on the entire buffer, so we can pass a default range of the entire buffer and not have to specify one. So let me demonstrate what that means. So if we just run this, this is a little silly because I'm demonstrating on a file with 1 line. Let's try a different one. Okay, so this is a JavaScript from that same page. It's in 2 lines. So our default range was the whole buffer, which has 2 lines in it, and therefore it populates our range with those lines, with the first line and last line in the buffer. Okay, and the reason it's doing that is we've supplied a default range for our function, for our command rather. Okay. Whew. All right. One last thing. I mentioned indentation before getting sidetracked. So let's just have it respect our indentation style with respect to tabs versus spaces, maybe number of spaces. Let me bring up the I'm just going to read in the help message from js-beautify so we can take a look at the arguments. Okay. Yeah, so what we're interested in here is the indent size and indent with tabs arguments there, flags. All right, so so in this case, we want to pull in another setting, right? In this case, we're interested in the expand tab setting, if we're concerned about spaces versus tabs. So I'm gonna we'll just call this tabs. Well, that doesn't actually semantically make sense. Let's call it expand tab equals. Okay. And then we can just, actually that's kind of unnecessary, isn't it? If, we can just check it directly, right? Okay. So if expand tab set, we want to specify the number of our shift width, essentially, right? To tell js-beautify how many spaces per indent level we want. So in that case, we can add another argument to our list, right? Sorry, what was that argument called? Indent size. And then we can set that to the value shift width. Okay, so in this other branch, we know that we're indenting with tabs. Expand tab is not set. So we want to tell js-beautify that's the case. So instead of setting the indent size, we can and then again, I'm going to indent with tabs is what it's called. Okay. All right, and there's one other detail that we need to take care of, and that is the type argument that js-beautify takes for JavaScript. The Vim file type is called JavaScript. The string they want is JS, so we have to take care of that. So I'm going to script. Yes. Okay. Oh, and these got separated from each other. Okay. So that's looking good. So let's jump back to our JavaScript file, make sure this is what we want. All right, so we have a default range of the entire buffer. We're reading from standard in. The file type we're currently interested in is JavaScript. We've translated that to JS to make js-beautify happy. And I have indentation with tabs set, so indent with tabs is being passed here. So we can try this out by replacing the echo with the execute, right? All right. And just to prove it's working, let's set expand tab and set a shift width of 4 and run that again. Oh, sorry. Okay, the highlighting's out of date because I didn't read in the file again, but you get the idea. Okay. All right, that's all I had planned. If you have any more suggestions for how we can improve this, we could continue, or I could take any other questions you may have, or may not have. Yeah.
Can I ask a question about how you constructed the list?
Sure.
So you build the initial list with like js-beautify and dash file dash.
Yeah.
And then you set the type variable, and then you append the type variable to the list with dash type. Could you set the type variable first and just put that straight into the list? The reason I ask is I just tried it and it didn't seem to work, and I'm confused as to why that is.
No, that should work. Yeah.
Okay. So
Yeah. So I believe what you're asking. Yeah, we can
yeah.
define the type first and simply add another item here. Yeah, you can do that. So type it's called, and then we can simply concatenate the type here.
So what I tried doing was, instead of concatenating, just having a comma between them, because I figured join appears to be inserting a space.
Yeah, that would work as well, certainly.
Okay.
Yeah.
That blew up, but maybe I just can't type. I discovered some weird limitation of VimScript, but apparently not.
Were you here in previous talk?
Sorry?
Were you here for the previous talk? You had completion?
No, I missed that one.
Okay, that helps.
How does the line 1, line 2 argument thing work?
Yeah.
In the actual js beautify command that gets run. There's that like.
Yeah, I did a really poor job of explaining that. So, let me point here. So in our command definition, we're telling Vim we're accepting a range in our custom command. That is, we can specify a start and end line for a command. And plenty of Vim commands, most Vim commands will take a range. For example, I don't know,
When you
the
use
delete command takes a range of lines to delete.
Right.
And you, so if, here, let me turn on line numbers. If I want to get rid of this block, line 12 to 17, for example, we can, 12, 17, delete. Bam. The argument is the default range we want to pass. So when we don't specify a range, what is the implied range? It's the entire buffer.
Right.
Okay. And in any case, these are like placeholders for where Vim will put the range when invoking everything to the right of our command name, right? And then those get passed to our function as arguments because we specified a range here, which we then reference as first line and last line.
So you use that default range, and then line 1 and line 2 become available as, I guess, sort of local variables to that command, or?
Yeah, so even though we specified the percent symbol, which represents, it's a special range that represents the whole buffer, it always just translates that into line numbers by the time our function gets called.
Cool.
And the range syntax in Vim is very, very flexible. It's not just line numbers, and besides the special whole buffer range, you can use marks to tie the whole thing together. We could, so if I want to mark A, mark B, I've just defined, here we can use our, so I beginning and end of the function are now delimited by marks. And then I can actually say I want to, delete the function. We can use reference marks in the range here instead of line numbers. It does even fancier stuff than that, though. So a dot represents the current line in a range, and then we can say current line to end func, and the line that contains this search pattern, right? And then we can delete up there. So ranges are super flexible.
That's awesome. I think when you did the type, you concatenated the dash type with type.
Yeah.
I think it's more semantics than concatenated. Because it looks like they belong together. The dash type and the type value or variable name. Yeah.
I figured out what I'd done wrong. I was missing a comma on the previous line.
Okay.
New programming.
Just out of curiosity, how many people were able to actually follow along? I was going a little fast, I think. Okay. Good to know.
I would have just passed the entire command along, building all the stuff, rather than adding it as I go piecemeal. I would have gotten all the parameters I needed and then just built the command at that point.
It's another way to do it. I think if this were to grow, it'd probably be, well, maybe it's just a matter of opinion, but if, for example, let's look at what other options are here.
Oh crap, never mind.
Yeah, it could get a little unwieldy.
Once you implement like many different options for different behavior, let's say you use tabs, you use spaces actually, and let's say that in my company we use tabs, and you want to keep a library for both cases, although you only use one. How do you know that the Vim plugin works? You know, like, do people test this? But how would you even test this? You know what I'm saying? Like, somebody sends a pull request to your plugin in GitHub. How do you know that it won't break other parts of the script once it gets reasonably big, that it's not obvious at first sight, although it never is? Think of the comma.
I mean, you could write tests.
You can, that's the question, like, do people write
Sure,
tests saying
sure.
VimScript and, okay.
Yeah.
Interesting.
There are a bunch of different testing frameworks for VimScript.
No way.
There's, I prefer one called VSpec, which is like an RSpec type thing.
To me, it sounds like testing JavaScript, like it's just not easy because it's advanced. I don't know.
Yeah, it depends on the nature of your plugin, but it
So
can actually be
straightforward.
actually this can be really useful if you're doing something involving like text objects, like custom text objects or whatever. Having a test suite's very, very useful for that kind of thing. Vader is another framework that's popular.
Interesting. Does Vim provide default testing like primitives? Wow.
No.
Okay.
If you wanted to do it without like a plugin, it would just be a matter of comparing lines, I guess. If you're testing, if you're writing like functional tests or integration tests or whatever, you could compare buffer contents. If you're doing more sort of unit testing thing, you can, simply use comparison operators to check the return values of functions or whatever. But like VSpec, I can probably give you an example of a.
You use this for Vim braces. But I mean, you compare buffers and you can call the winner. That's what I meant.
Yeah.
So you like having that is already useful.
That's showing
You
on
could
input to diff.
Okay, I see. Interesting. I am surprised.
It's awesome.
That's cool. That looks a lot like RSpec.
Yeah. So this is VSpec. These are tests I've written for some plugin I was messing around with. But yeah. So it's basically an extension to VimScript. Yeah. Vader takes a different approach. It's a little more. It's not much like it has its own unique format. It's not like writing VimScript.
I'll take a photo of this. I think it's a surprise to me.
Here, I can actually show you a better one. I think I have. Let's see, where was that? Yeah. Oh yeah, so this is good. this was actually where it was super useful. So I have I write a lot of Markdown for documentation, messages, whatever. It comes up a lot. And one of the things I really like is list continuation. So if I'm writing a list on and I hit enter, it gives me a new bullet to enter. If I want to end the list, I just hit enter again on a empty list item. It removes it, goes to the next line. This works with numbered lists as well. I can even use the O command to open a new line above this item, and it should renumber the list appropriately.
I really need this. What is this?
It's just some stuff I wrote.
Is
So,
it GitHub?
yeah, it's in my configuration on there. So this was a little tricky, especially with like the numbering and stuff. So I wrote a test suite for it, which has been very valuable. So what I'm doing is basically just executing various normal commands and list context and making sure that the line contents match what I expect.
It's possible you just persuaded me to install a Vim plugin.
Right. Like the indentation also breaks in my.
Is it tested though?
I can also get like checklists, 1, 2, 3, and I can hit enter to check and uncheck.
Wow.
What is that?
That's incredible.
Do you have your dot files available somewhere?
Is that like a special internet thing? What is it?
So this is using Vim's conceal feature. So if I go into insert mode, you can see what's the underlying text. It just uses plus and minuses. It also supports GitHub style checkboxes with the brackets, 1, 2, right? And then we can check and uncheck these the same way with enter. And the check state was with an X.
I mean, I want you to use your plugin.
What's the name?
Please post it on the meetup.
Well, it's
Really want this.
if you want it bad enough, you can find it in my configuration.
You should make it its own
Yeah, extract it
plugin.
out.
Yeah, by the way, this is my name and contact information. This is my PGP fingerprint in case you want to contact me by email. And this is my website, and you can find more of this stuff through that indirectly.
You should totally make it out into its own Vim plugin.
Yeah, go back.
Maybe.
I'll go back to the contact information, please. The contact.
Sure. I'm afraid there are edge cases I didn't think of that,
That's what
take
open
care of
source
it.
is for.
Yes,
Pull
exactly.
requests.
You'll have a dozen pull requests by tomorrow.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. That's so cool.
Oh yeah, as I was saying, this is utilizing Vim's conceal feature. So it's a feature of syntax highlighting where you can conceal some text and optionally replace it with another character. So yeah, I just threw in some fancy characters here to represent checkboxes. And I'm using it. I don't really need to use a plugin for this, but I'm using another plugin called Switch.vim by Andrew Radev. I don't know if I'm pronouncing his name correctly. That's a cool plugin. I mean, this is it's too much for this use case, but it's useful for switching between things. It's pretty vague, but I have it mapped to enter. It'll just toggle things that are under the cursor. Another example would be like a programming language that has true and false primitives. You can just hit enter on it, it'll toggle between true and false or whatever,
That's
stuff like that.
dangerous.
Yeah.
Something similar bound inside of, I think is it Chalk.js or one of those that they use inside the Yeoman to be able to trigger out radio buttons inside of a console. Yeah,
you can find all this markdown stuff in auto load. Yeah. So I can promote, demote headings. This open line function is what handles continuation of lists and block quotes and maybe a couple other things.
I can't think of writing so much documentation and stuff.
Yeah, no. This is the only stuff that I managed to cover with the VSpec tests. It was fun. This handles inserting horizontal rules that are the width of my text width setting. So if I have like text width, text wrapped to 80 characters, whatever, and I insert a horizontal rule in Markdown, it'll be 80 characters wide. Except if it's at the beginning of the file, it's treated as YAML front matter, like in a Jekyll blog post, and it'll insert the delimiters above and below.
I just can't believe how much time you put into this and you don't have it in its own thing.
I don't think it's ready for prime time. I started trying to rig something up where I could follow links in Markdown with the enter key, even like reference style links and stuff, but I didn't get very far with that. I could use some pull requests there, so yeah, I'll post a link, I guess.
Throw it on GitHub. I bet you have at least 100 followers in a matter of minutes.